You finally sit down. The work is done, the messages are answered, the day is quiet. So you open your phone, or you lie back for a moment, and almost immediately, something uncomfortable appears. A small voice in your head says, "You shouldn't be relaxing right now." You feel a strange pressure in your chest, a mild restlessness, maybe even guilt. Not because something is wrong, but because you're doing nothing. And the strange part is this. You were exhausted 5 minutes ago. You needed rest. But the moment you allow yourself to relax, your brain suddenly treats it like a mistake. If you've ever felt that quiet guilt during rest, there's a reason for it, and it has very little to do with laziness. It has everything to do with how your brain learned to measure your worth. But to understand why that happens, you have to look at something deeper, because this feeling didn't start today. It started years ago. There's a pattern psychologists often see in people who struggle to relax. Your brain slowly learns to connect productivity with safety, not consciously, but emotionally. When you were younger, moments of approval often came after effort, finishing homework, helping someone, being responsible, achieving something. And your brain quietly noticed the pattern. Effort equals approval. Productivity equals safety. Over time, your nervous system builds a rule. If I'm useful, I'm safe. This is not a conscious thought. It's an emotional pattern stored in the emotional brain, especially in a structure called the amygdala, which constantly scans for signals of safety or threat. When you're working or solving problems, the brain reads it as control, and control makes the nervous system feel stable. But when you suddenly stop, your brain loses that signal, and for a brief moment, it doesn't know how to interpret the silence. So it fills the gap with tension. Not because resting is bad, but because your brain never fully learned that rest can also be safe. You can see this pattern in small, everyday moments. You finish a long task, you finally have free time, but instead of relaxing, you start thinking about the next thing. Maybe you check your email again, or you scroll your phone, not because you want to, but because sitting still feels uncomfortable. Psychologists call this cognitive overactivation. Your brain becomes used to constant mental motion. Think of it like a car engine that has been running all day. If you suddenly turn it off, the silence feels strange. Your mind has been operating in doing mode for so long that being mode feels unfamiliar. And unfamiliar things make the brain slightly uneasy, so it pushes you back into activity. Not because activity is necessary, but because it's predictable. But here's where it gets more complicated. For many people, the guilt around relaxation is not just about productivity, it's about identity. Your brain slowly builds a story about who you are. Maybe you became the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who handles things. And identity is one of the most powerful forces in human psychology. Your brain works very hard to protect it. So when you rest, something subtle happens. Your brain briefly asks, if I'm not being useful right now, who am I? That small identity gap can create discomfort, and discomfort triggers the brain's motivation system. So you start looking for something to fix, organize, or improve, not because you need to, but because your brain wants to return to a familiar version of you. But here's where the story takes an interesting turn. Most people think this guilt means they're too driven, too ambitious, too perfectionistic. But the deeper explanation is actually about nervous system conditioning. Your brain has two major operating modes. One is called the sympathetic system. This is your action system. It prepares the body for focus, effort, and problem solving. The other is the parasympathetic system. This is the recovery system. It slows the body down and allows restoration. Ideally, your brain moves smoothly between these two states. work, then rest, effort, then recovery. But when someone spends years in constant output mode, the brain becomes heavily biased toward the action system. So when rest appears, it doesn't feel natural. It feels like the system is shutting down too quickly. The brain reacts with mild anxiety, almost like a guard who suddenly realizes no one is watching the gate. And here's the part most people never notice. The guilt you feel during rest is actually a protective reflex. Your brain is trying to keep you inside a familiar rhythm. It's not attacking you, it's protecting the routine that has worked before. But protection can become overprotection, and when that happens, something important slowly disappears: true recovery. Without recovery, the brain stays in a low-level stress loop, even if you appear productive, even if life looks stable. The nervous system never fully resets, which is why many people feel strangely tired even when they are resting. Their brain never truly enters the recovery state. And this often begins much earlier than people realize. Many adults who struggle with relaxation grew up in environments where being useful was rewarded more than simply existing. Maybe you were praised when you performed well, or appreciated when you helped, or noticed when you achieved something. Those experiences train the brain's reward system, especially a neurotransmitter called dopamine. Dopamine reinforces behaviors that lead to approval or progress, so the brain starts associating effort with emotional reward, and over time, resting feels like stepping away from the reward loop, not dangerous, but slightly uncomfortable. But here's something important. This pattern is not a flaw, it's an adaptation. Your brain built a system that helped you succeed, that helped you stay responsible, that helped you keep moving forward. The problem isn't the system itself. The problem is that the system forgot to include rest as part of success, and that small missing piece changes everything. There's a quiet paradox hiding here. The same trait that makes you disciplined also makes it harder to stop. The same awareness that helps you stay productive also keeps your mind scanning for unfinished tasks. In psychology, this is sometimes called goal-oriented cognition. Your brain becomes highly tuned to progress, which is powerful, but it also means your mind rarely feels done. And if the brain never feels done, rest begins to feel undeserved. But here's the truth many people eventually discover. Rest is not the opposite of productivity. It's part of the cycle that makes productivity possible. Your brain actually performs important maintenance during rest: memory consolidation, emotional processing, creative problem solving. Neuroscientists sometimes call this the default mode network. When the brain is not focused on tasks, this network activates and reorganizes information, which is why people often get their best ideas in the shower or during a quiet walk. The brain finally has room to breathe. So how do you retrain your brain to relax without guilt? It doesn't happen through forcing yourself to just relax. Your brain doesn't respond well to commands like that. Instead, it learns through small, consistent signals. First, start reframing rest as completion, not interruption. When you finish work, say to yourself, "The cycle is complete." This gives the brain a clear endpoint. It reduces the urge to keep scanning for unfinished tasks. Second, introduce structured rest. Instead of random downtime, create small rituals: a walk after work, tea before bed, reading for 10 minutes. When rest becomes predictable, the brain begins to treat it as part of the routine rather than an absence of activity. Third, reduce the identity pressure around usefulness. You are not valuable only when producing something. Your nervous system needs moments where you exist without proving anything. Even small moments like sitting quietly or watching the sunset teach the brain a new association. Stillness can also be safe. Fourth, pay attention to how your body feels after real rest. When the nervous system fully relaxes, your breathing slows, your thoughts become softer, your attention widens. These physical signals teach the brain that rest is not danger, it's recovery. Over time, something subtle changes. The guilt becomes quieter, the restlessness fades faster, and your brain slowly rebuilds its rhythm. Work, then rest. Effort, then recovery. The way human biology was designed to function. So if you sometimes feel guilty when you finally relax, it doesn't mean you're lazy. It doesn't mean you're broken. It means your brain learned to survive in a world that rewards constant output. And now it's slowly learning something new. That you are allowed to pause. That you are allowed to breathe. That you don't have to earn every moment of stillness. And sometimes, the most productive thing your brain can do is nothing at all. If this idea felt strangely familiar to you, it might be worth paying attention to moments when your mind resists rest, because understanding those moments often reveals something deeper about how your mind learned to protect you. And the more you understand that system, the easier it becomes to work with it instead of fighting it.